the courage to be vulnerable in love and life. And so I'll cover 3 areas. One is why vulnerability is hard or so hard for us, especially the strong, independent people. What makes vulnerability powerful, not weak, like why it's our strength and it's not a weakness. And some steps for us to deal with this, right? Like what you can do about it, to start opening up and to letting people in without losing yourself. So starting off the first part, which is why is it so scary? Why is vulnerability so scary? Because most of us, probably all of us, have somewhere in our timeline in the past where there has been hurt, like we've experienced hurt before, and we've learned that opening up meant being rejected or dismissed or abandoned, or that we didn't get the result that we want, right? Which was most likely love. Or secondly, we were taught to be strong, in quotes, self-sufficient or unshakable, which is, I would say, not an accurate definition of strength, when vulnerability felt like weakness or maybe even danger, right? Or like over time, it felt like weakness or danger. And the third reason is that we fear losing control. So control obviously is there so that we can predict, and the mind, being a pattern recognition machine, it wants to look at patterns and recognize when there needs to be a warning and that you need to be aware and basically not get hurt. Being vulnerable maybe meant being seen. And when you're used to protecting your heart and not being seen, not allowing love in, not opening up, it can feel scary or maybe even terrifying. And what does vulnerability really do? So vulnerability is the bridge between loneliness and connection. So it's how we experience love, not just a pretend type love or when people are performing and making it up. It's where we experience emotional safety when there is vulnerability in the dynamic. There's trust or a deepening of trust. And as we allow ourselves to get vulnerable, maybe with ourselves or in life, there's a deeper level of self-expression and also a sense of freedom. Like we just feel a level of freedom internally and in our lives and in ourselves so that we can express ourselves. And you cannot fully receive love if you're only letting people see this kind of a put together, curated, polished version of yourself. I know this firsthand. Been chipping away at my I don't need you wall, or the wall of protection, which is the opposite of vulnerability. Letting people see the kind of the together version or the perfect version of ourselves means that they cannot see the truth of who we are. Therefore, what they're responding and who they're responding to is a made-up version, not the real version, right? Like that we haven't shown to them. So how could they respond to that version? So real connection happens when we're able to, or willing to, show up raw, imperfect, and real, so that other people can see us, and the connection happens when they stay. So that is the hope, but that's the part we don't have control of. Vulnerability allows a healing in relationships, whatever the dynamic of relationship, intimate, non-intimate, family, friendship, whatever it is. It's a reclaiming of truth when we're vulnerable, because we're allowing ourselves to go past the masks and the veneers and into a depth of rawness within ourselves. And while it may not feel like it in the moment, it might feel scary, and during it might feel messy, but actually afterwards we're left with a greater level of confidence within ourselves and courage. So afterwards there is this sense of not bravery but courage, because it takes that to open when we know we can't control the outcome. There is no guarantee that you would get hurt or not hurt. And so what are the steps, and what are some steps that we can take? One part is actually to obviously look within ourselves first before we start to look outside. So as we're looking in, to start to look at what is it that I'm not facing? What am I hiding away from within myself as in emotions and or emotional layers, or in our work, in our body of work, we call it layers of the story, the mechanism of the story, the parts that I'm ignoring, running away from, not wanting to face, that is uncomfortable or maybe just difficult, that I know for myself, like sometimes there's this, I'll do it later. I'm aware of it. It's there. I don't want to go into it. I'll just do it later or next time, next opportunity. But right now, I'm just going to dig my heels in and let the wall be there. So starting with just getting, I want to say honest, but vulnerable with ourselves. I'd like to open up to ourselves and really get honest and look at, okay, this is difficult, or this is scary, or this feels unnerving and I want to run away or hide away or close down, or shut down, or put my walls up and be that person that has it together. So these are all kind of mechanisms. And then just but feeling into what is true. As you start to, it's like visually, I'm thinking of it like as we're drilling down the layers, or I don't know, like an oil well that drills down the layers of the earth. So, first layers that you drill down might be, what can you be aware of? So maybe the first layers that you're aware of is, so I feel anxious or I feel fear, and really acknowledging that, as I've said before, like seeing it as it is, not more, not less. So really starting to feel into it, and feel into it doesn't mean stay there and wallow in it, but acknowledge it, see it as it is, and see it for what it is. And also then you can do this in meditation as well, or in our work. A lot of times when we're doing the mini awakens and the check-ins and where the deep work is done in our body of work, I'm normally guiding someone through that process. Everyone gets to benefit from the process as I'm guiding someone, whoever is sharing. And most of the time, this is the feel part. It's actually going in and getting present to and uncovering some of the immediate layers first, getting present with the self, with ourself first, and the emotions and the emotional layers. And it will start to reveal dimensions of the narrative, right? That's been playing off in the mind, that you're either unaware and it's been running the show, your life, or you're somewhat aware or quite aware, but you haven't been able to do something about it yet. So this is the beginning of melting away, right, those layers, the healing process, getting present to the self by way of being vulnerable with ourselves. So it's like practice, you could say. It's not actually practice run because it's a healing process with the self, but it's like practice run for when we do it with someone outside of us, so anyone else. So the practice of being open and vulnerable and staying with, if it is difficult, staying with the difficult emotions, not because you want to torture yourself, but because you know that going through that terrain of what is difficult, on the other side is the breakthrough. On the other side of the resistance, on the other side of the difficulty or the discomfort is normally where the breakthrough is. So we're willing to actually go through that terrain of the landscape, the internal landscape, knowing that, or in the hope that there is something on the other side, and normally there is, right? There is healing, there is transformation on the other side. So being vulnerable before might not feel like strength, during it might feel messy, but after it, when the healing has occurred, when there is a transformation in the dynamic, in the relationship, what it causes is that it causes an opening to a giving and receiving of love. So whatever the dynamic, whether it's intimate or not, a flow, it opens to a flow of love. So therefore, that flow of love, that connection facilitates a healing to both, or whoever is actually involved, if it's more than two people in that dynamic. And therefore, a relationship gets healed. And then the other part of it is letting go of the attachment to the outcome, which I know in our work we look at the Bhagavad Gita, which talks about our authorities in the actions we take, not the results. And as much as this mechanism that is trying to protect the self wants a guarantee, wants an insurance policy, wants to know that it's going to be safe, that it's not going to get hurt, that it's going to work out well, or the other person or people are going to stay, they're not going to leave when, you're open and vulnerable. That is the part that we don't have guarantee of. And the more you train yourself to actually show up and practice the vulnerability, it's not a weakness, it's a strength, because it takes strength to choose to be open, to be vulnerable, and to deal with whether the other person or people stay or not, whether they leave or stay. So therefore, allowing the result to be whatever it's going to be. And the point of it is not to be accepted by everyone. It is to stop abandoning ourselves. So by being vulnerable, we're actually being open to ourselves. We're training ourselves. We've already won by choosing to be vulnerable, by choosing to be open, if there was a winning at all, right? Because you've honored yourself. You've not let yourself go, basically. You haven't abandoned yourself, which is normally what we do when we close up and shut down and not let that dimension of life come in, love basically come in. So therefore, whatever the result is, it is a good result because you've grown in strength, right? Like you've chosen to open, and that practice of opening up, whether you receive or whether you get the result or not, it is good in the long run, in the long term. And for anyone who's listening to this in the podcast or the YouTube videos or the recordings, if you don't know this and you're curious about working on yourself or going deeper or being guided, then little plug, on the 21st of April to the 27th of April, there's a little window where you can come in and trial our Elevate Premium membership for 7 days for free. And once a month, we do this thing called Mini Awaken. And in Mini Awaken, we do interventions. I do interventions and healing with the group, and you can allow yourself to come in, be guided if you want to work on this or these kinds of topics. So to summarize, vulnerability is not a weakness. It's the most courageous thing we'll do because it's a choice. It's not a surrender. It's not a defeat, right? It comes from a place of choice, which is a place of strength. It's a place of power. It's not you've been victimized, right? Like you've chosen to open up. It requires that there's a certain capacity to be able to hold that situation, that dynamic, to open up and to receive, or to open up to receive. It's how we create love, connection, and a life that actually feels like yours. Because that's you being in the driver's seat of your life, because you've taken control of the parts that you actually have control of. Your actions, your part. And that's all we can take control of. That's all we can drive, basically. And the rest of it is going to be what it's going to be. Chances are, most of the time, or almost all the time, as far as I've seen, when someone's actually been vulnerable, even if they didn't get the result, like immediately, it went in a good way for them. Normally, they get the result that they want. And even when it didn't, it turns out good for them. But the ones that are shut down and closed down, as a long-term strategy, it never works. It just results in years, decades of maybe carrying anger, resentment, bitterness. And sometimes you see people who are more advanced in their years, but they haven't actually developed. So they're just closed and sad or angry or just bitter, and just something that's been eating up. And also then they're walled up as well. So it's our choice. And the people who have allowed themselves to open up, even if they don't get the result that time, there are other times in the right time and place that they get the results that they want. a lot of times, maybe even better than they imagined that very first time.